Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I am out on location. I'm at Hardwick House with Sir Julian Rose. Hello, Julian.
Hardwick Estate.
Sorry, Hardwick Estate, on the farm itself.
Yes, hello, Richard.
Now, of course, what you don't know, we've already had a lovely meal and we've walked around quite a bit and we've explored everything. Sir Julian has been on the show a few times now. We've talked about the state of play with things like the globalists and what they're trying to do. Today, taking advantage of your very kind invitation to come up and see what you do here, I thought I would ask you a little bit about, from a grassroots point of view, if people are starting out thinking about doing some growing for themselves. You know, you're an organic farmer, you have farms here and in Poland, and you've been doing this since the 1970s. What kind of advice can you give to people? Realistic advice, because I know it's not easy. And at this time, I think people are thinking, oh yeah, we'll just get into a bit of growing, it'll be easy.
Well, no, it's not. No. Well, that's the first thing one should remove from one's mind. But you don't have to remove it from your mind. You can start on that little piece of land and you will find out that it's not easy.
Right, yes.
So you don't actually even have to remove the thought.
It's permanently
You
there.
can do the experiment and you will find, oh, it's not as simple as I thought. In a certain sense, nature is extremely generous. And you can stick a seed in the ground and on some sort of average conditions, that will probably grow. There's a reasonable chance it'll grow.
Yes.
Because nature's very resilient. But from the point of view of making a serious attempt to grow some food for one's own consumption, or possibly even more than one's own consumption, and especially if you want to earn an income from it, then it's a serious operation from the word go.
Yes.
And you have to have some knowledge and some creative, I would even say, attitude about what it means to actually become a grower.
Right.
I use that word as opposed to farmer, because on the whole, farming is done on a bigger scale.
Yes.
And farmers usually are working on large areas of land, and there is a lot of money involved, because it simply has to be to have big tractors and big implements and big, etc.
Yes.
But if you're starting from scratch, as I said, maybe you're living in a city or a small town or whatever, and you want a piece of land, and you want to start growing fresh food and eating it, then you have to say to yourself, look, I'm prepared to do this as a serious issue, not just as a piece of fun. If you do it just for fun, you'll stop within a few weeks, because it's hard work.
I was going to say, your back starts to ache and you realise you're bending in positions that you're not used to doing.
Yes, your back would probably be one of the first things. And then gradually other parts of your body.
Right.
For instance, your biceps might start, hurting like mad, because you're not used to lifting up a small wheelbarrow full of dirt, and that's already very heavy.
Yes.
And then using a shovel, for example, digging your garden. People are not used anymore to using their muscles and to exerting themselves and to getting into a sweat, I'll say even, which is very positive health-wise. We're all supposed to sweat on a regular basis to have healthy bodies. So we wanted to dispel the idea from the beginning that this is some easy ticket.
Yes.
So that's cleared, I think.
Right, absolutely. So what sort of things should people be looking at? Because I think the other myth that we've come to create for ourselves is that you just put something in the land at any old time, and it's relative, within a week or two, there you are, you've got that prize pumpkin or that wonderful marrow, and you can start eating.
Well, first of all, the average time taken for a seed to mature into a plant that's you'd want to cut and take into your kitchen to eat would be 4 to 5 months.
Right. So you've got to look ahead, haven't you?
So you've got to look ahead. Then the typical planting time for almost all seeds is the springtime, and that should be obvious to most people, but it isn't necessarily anymore, because people are so distant from even the most basic knowledge. So you have to get to a point where the weather is becoming a bit more predictable, where there's some guarantee that you won't be getting a severe frost, for instance. So if you're starting to plant stuff in April, in a year like this, you might be in a problem, because there might be a very severe frost later in the month, and all your work is already done. And you might have thought, oh, I never thought that the weather would intervene, especially not in April, or possibly even May.
Right.
But it might, and this is the point about farming and growing. It's extremely unpredictable. You cannot actually set your sights on being sure you're going to get a harvest, even if you're the best grower in the country.
Yes.
Because there's so many potential intervening factors. There's weather, there's disease, nowadays there's regulatory concerns from people who say, oh, you can't grow that, and then there's neighbours who say, no, I don't like the smell of something you're growing.
Right.
There's 101 reasons why you'll be up against it for one reason or another. So good to start with a sense of absolute determination. Doesn't matter what nature throws at you, people throw at you, the weather throws at you, you're going to do it. You're going to make a determined effort to do it.
One thing that I suppose we should start with, of course, which I imagine with all organic farmers, but any farmer, is, of course, the soil.
Yes.
Because it's the soil you're putting stuff into, and it's the soil that feeds and nurtures, along with the sunshine, of course. Exactly. But the soil is everything.
Soil is everything. So really, at stage one, what condition is your soil in?
And how would you know?
Well, you can do it. You can buy kits. They're called pH testers. That's acidity and alkalinity.
Right.
And there's a balance which you're looking for, which actually didn't mean anything to anybody. It's around about 7.5, which is a balance between acidity and alkalinity. And you can use these and test the condition of your soil. If it's wildly out in an acid direction, there's a solution. If it's wildly out in an alkaline direction, there's a solution. The solutions vary.
Right.
They could be putting lime on a field, or it could be even growing a particular type of plant that adds the dimension that you're missing.
Yes.
It could be a number of different things.
Because I'm just thinking, on the South Downs where I live, or close to the South Downs, and we passed a chalk pit here actually.
Yes.
In the old days, they would take the chalk to use to put on the ground to get rid of the acidity.
Acidity, yeah. That's alkalinity against acidity.
Right.
And now there are also products that you can buy in garden centres which are, they're trying to make the job easier.
Yes.
But they're quite expensive, and they don't always do a particularly good job. So you're wise to get into a very early... I like books written in the 1930s and even 50s.
Yes.
When the best books were written on a very, very practical basis.
Yes.
Which will tell you exactly what you need to do. But nowadays, with gardening being actually extremely popular, in England's perhaps almost more than other countries, gardening is almost a way of life for a lot of people.
Yes.
But that means mostly flowers. It doesn't necessarily mean growing crops of vegetables.
No,
it means
or
having
hobbyist,
or beautiful borders,
yes,
nice shrubs. And this is the most typical sort of English approach towards growing things around your house. But what we would like to see happen, and I think a lot of people would like to see happen, is the balance shifting in favour of fruit and vegetables. You still keep your beautiful flowers and your shrubs, but actually you gradually cut back on that level and go into growing food that you actually need and want on a daily basis. So the soil condition would be absolutely the first thing to think about.
Yes.
The second thing to think about would be protection to a certain degree against weather. So you'd probably want to choose somewhere not in the most obviously windy or frosty or whatever area. So something a little bit sheltered. But then you've got to think about how much sunlight your plants are going to get. So you don't want to start a garden under a large, under a huge willow tree.
Can they have too much sun?
No, not too much sun. That's the nature of balance, is to always try and find the medium between extremes.
Yes.
So you're looking for the medium between extremes. But personally, I would say when you're absolutely starting from scratch, simply don't worry too much about any of that. No. It can seem overwhelming after all.
Yes,
that's one of the problems with these sort of books. You start picking up and it's written by some famous garden man who's appeared on television for the last 20 years. And he's telling you with pictures and everything. And it seems like, oh my God, how can I possibly?
Yes.
So you should scrap all that. And really, I think the first thing is to go and buy a decent shovel.
Right.
Preferably one with a nice cutting edge, because shovel going into the ground, if it's blunt at the bottom end, it can be very hard work.
Right.
But if it's got a little bit of a sharp end, it
makes it a bit easier.
Yes, and it feels good to turn the soil. I can tell people this.
Yes.
It feels good. It also exercises your muscles, and that's very good for you.
Yes.
So when you do have your meal, you've got an appetite.
Oh,
I always eat regularly, regardless of whether I'm hungry or not.
Well, that's an interesting thing, isn't it?
You see, well, we believe, and information comes through from people that have explored this subject, you should eat when you're hungry.
Yes.
Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it?
It does make sense. So what about failure? Because I think that's something that people, when they start something in all walks of life, something that seems very easy, a seasoned grower, gardener, farmer like yourself, will know through your experience, oh, I didn't quite get this right, or this I should do this time, or I can sense in the weather something or whatever. But somebody starting out will perhaps plant a whole load of things and maybe slugs have eaten everything and they go, oh, I just can't do this. Failure to me is about, it's teaching you something.
Yeah, well said. It definitely is. It's probably the best teacher. There's no such success as failure, and failure's no success at all. I think it's a line from Bob Dylan.
Oh, is it?
But anyway.
So it's not to be put off by the...
What I would suggest under those circumstances is that you talk with someone else who's been through it.
Yes.
Because it can be overwhelming. And, you know, if you're only on your own, it can be very overwhelming.
Yes.
Okay, a very determined person is going to keep going anyway, but not everybody has initially perhaps that level of determination. But you'll always find, if you ask around, someone who will surprise you, probably, by saying, oh yeah, you know, we had this terrible problem. You know, we tried to grow carrots and for 2-3 years in a row they got disease. And one year they were flooded out. And another year it was far too dry. But we kept going, and now we've got a wonderful crop in my back garden. You're going to come and have a look at it. Oh, great. What do you use on this? We don't use anything, really. We do a bit of composting of our vegetables. Anything green that you bring into your kitchen that hasn't been cooked, you start a compost heap with. You know, you have to learn very early on how to make a compost heap, and it's a lot of fun.
Yes.
And it's very simple, and there's 101 different ways that you will find on the internet or in a book how to do it. Very, very simple.
Yes.
Actually. And it's...
And this is about feeding the plants.
Feeding the plants. You see, the soil, as you rightly pointed out, is absolutely the key. So it's got to be in prime condition. So the miracle of compost is that you chuck everything onto your compost heap, having got it started with twigs and straw and various other components, and water, obviously.
Right.
And then,
so there's air inside.
Yes, to get it to heat up,
right,
which has to heat up to a very high temperature at the centre.
Which it's doing automatically.
It will do automatically. Yes. You don't have to do anything.
No, it's not like charcoal or anything like that.
All you have to do is put the stuff on.
Yeah.
And after a period of, well, let's say 9 months to a year, it's soil that comes out the other end. Right. And it's a miracle when you actually think about it. You can't believe how nature works when you see this. It's going on as rubbish. You can even put newspaper on it, cardboard.
Can you really?
You can put anything which is biodegradable. Yes. Right? And that's critical that it's biodegradable. And it will come out in 9 months' time or 6 months' time or a year's time, depending partly on weather conditions, as beautiful soil, which was perfect for your next attempt at next year's veg plot. Right. In fact, it'll make a huge difference, because that will already be what the plants really like and thrive on. Whereas the first time round, obviously, you know, it's got to be nourished and nourished and nourished, and it gets better every year. Yes. And so you have to have a long-term view. Now, there's an interesting story about that in relation to Hardwick Estate. I take people on farm walks, and I take them into the forest here. And I say to them, do you know how old that tree is, you know, for example? This beech tree, for instance. And they'll say, wow, maybe 30, 40 years, maybe. And someone else will say, well, maybe 70 years old, or something like that. And this is a mature one I'm talking about, right. Mature beech tree. Yes. And I say to note that it's 130 years old. So then someone will say to you, well, you get a lot of money for that, then? You get a lot of money for that? And I say, no, unfortunately not. All the mills have closed now in the Chiltern Hills, so we sell it for firewood. That's all we can do. And they said, what? You mean you're selling that? I wait 130 years and then selling it as firewood. And
It burns in an
then
instant.
someone says, that sounds like a really uneconomic proposition. Why did anyone ever plant forests?
Yes.
And then you get into this very interesting dimension, which is they didn't just plant them for making money. And that one of the nice traditions in a country like England is the countryside is was a balance between forestry and farming and gardening, etc. And each of these things gives something to the other one.
Yes.
And they're also very pleasurable to be in. And they also have value in the wood, even if they don't get the value now economically. You can build with this material.
Yes.
You couldn't have a house with wooden beams, and you couldn't have wooden anything if someone hadn't thought, someone's going to harvest that crop 130 years from now.
Yes, I won't be around.
I won't be around, nor will my grandchildren will be, maybe. But, so the point is, on a smaller scale, this is also true in growing and in farming. So you've got to start getting used to the idea that you're looking ahead for each season. So you're looking ahead 6 months, 7 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, depending entirely on what it is you're going to try and grow. Some crops you actually can leave in the ground, which are called perennial crops as opposed to annual crops. And if you get them well established, you can leave them 4 or 5 years.
And they'll just keep coming back.
And they'll keep coming back. But then this is very much part of learning to be with nature, as opposed to being in control of nature, So it's something to do with one's ego. One's got to stop thinking, I'm in control here.
Yes.
How frustrating this is that this stuff's taking so long.
Yes.
God, I'm going to buy some nitrate because it's ridiculous.
Yes.
You've got to let all that drop away and feel that you are going through an initiation process.
It's this whole process of the farming which we had back, as you say, in the 1930s, pre-war, and then comes along big corporations and they speed the process up and they separate the process into bigger fields, into monoculture. And I've spoken about this before.
Yes.
And we, the people who would have been more involved in farms, whether through ancillary things, have been so separated that this way of life, becomes it is now an industry, and we've got to try and get back that way of life so that you're, as you said, you're spending time and respect with with the plants, which will be your food and provide you with so much health.
Exactly that. So we have to decorporatize farming, actually. Now, this is exactly the opposite direction that we're being told to go in by Klaus Schwab and
his
others,
mates, yes.
Who should be nameless, and governments who just basically are doing what they're told to do by the small cabal that run the world at the moment.
Want to.
Yes, and so we have to be aware on another level now, and I don't think there's any way around this. That's why people hopefully are watching your show.
I hope so.
Because you've also got to see what's going on the planet and how we're being forced into a state of slavery to corporation, and how the biodiversity of nature and the biosphere itself, all elements of nature are suffering hugely as a consequence of this. And perhaps human beings the most of all. We're totally blocked because we can't have this relationship with nature, we're told. But we can if you go for a nice walk in the woods with your dog, and you're given the places where you can do it, so you don't complain too much about it. So the point about this is people accept a certain level of slavery because they don't see the bigger picture. They don't realize that everybody's being subjected to this and that the entire planet is being run into the ground and destroyed, and that the objective of the globalist regime is to turn everything into materialism. So the opposite end of that spectrum, which you might call a spiritual evaluation of your life, you need connection with nature almost as the first element.
Yes.
It's not a passive connection with nature I'm talking about.
No, no, no.
Plenty of people can sit under a tree and meditate and think that's it then, isn't it?
Yes.
No, I'm not referring to that. I'm referring to a direct relationship with nature, a symbiotic relationship, give and take with nature, learning what nature has to teach you. You, in turn, coming back with the creative idea how to support nature, how to improve soil fertility, how to create biodiversity of different species, etc. What grows with what, and attracting more bees, insects, which are going out of extinction.
So pollinators.
Pollinating, and therefore the entire food chain is affected because of this. We will have to have laboratory food if we carry on this way.
Yes.
There won't be another option. So you have to be at the same time pragmatic and determined and a bit in love with the idea of nature.
Yes.
As you are aware of the horror story being applied to us at the moment. And that will give you extra incentive to create your, what we, Jadwiga and I like to call ark. Building the ark. That's what was done in ancient time at the Great Flood with Noah. He built an ark. God told him, you've got to build an ark to save the species. And he took 2 of each species in the Bible story. Well, that's what we have to do now.
Yes.
We have to build our arks.
So my worry is that a lot of people get on board with the concept and go, oh yes, we'll do grassroots, we'll give it a go. My worry at the moment, and I don't want to put any downers on this because it's all about trying to raise our vibrations and stay positive, is that people love the idea, but when it comes to the actual work, they might have a bit of a shock.
Are you thinking about yourself?
Well, myself included,
yes, exactly.
Actually, because I'm used to sitting in front of a camera and you know, not working terribly hard and just spouting out ideas. But given the opportunity to get out there, I mean, I feel the affinity, but I can't sit here as an authority. Whereas, Sir Julian, you can. Because you've done it all your life.
I can, but on the other hand, I was very fortunate. Come on, let's be honest about it. You know,
But you know what's
yes,
needed.
I do. And I mean, I went through hell and high water trying to create my organic farm against the odds.
Yes.
Starting in 1975.
Yes.
And I was a hands-on man all the way through. I learnt myself by doing it.
So do you think the odds are the same now?
Well, actually, I mean, there is no better way to learn than by doing it yourself. And essentially, that's always going to be hard work.
Yes.
So you have to get used to the idea right from the beginning, mentally, actually, because it's mostly mental, that hard work is not only painful at times, but also highly stimulating and pleasurable, and you get fabulous results from it. And the most beautiful result you can get from it is to go out of your kitchen door, pick that thing, and eat it, and then you just get this thing, a totally different dimension of taste, energy, and sort of vitamin enrichment, if you like, by comparison to what it would have been if you bought that stuff at Tesco. It was 5 days old and gone through 10 temperature changes and was tired and has no vitamins at all. So you know, that's a hugely rewarding experience.
Yes.
But yes, I would never, ever suggest to anybody that this is going to be serious hard work.
Yes.
Yeah.
But do we have a choice?
No choice.
We've got to do this.
Yep. No future without that. None.
Well, Julian, thank you so much for talking with me today and bringing me here and showing me around the estate. I hope that although we've talked about the hard work in a realistic way, it has actually inspired people to think more seriously about getting out, growing food and reaping those rewards.
Yes, exactly that. And I can tell you one thing for sure about it. You will come out of this experience, even if it doesn't work specifically, a much wiser, more thoughtful and aware individual.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.